Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another session of Parallel Barkings. Woof, woof. My name is Larry Backer, and I'm here with Arianna Backer.
Hey.
Today, we're going to talk about a different aspect. For the last several weeks, we've been talking about how the world is going to, I guess, hell or some reasonable equivalent thereof in a handbasket. Hay basket? My English idioms are not so good. But anyway, it's going somewhere, but it isn't a very nice place. And we've been talking about various aspects of it in a lot of ways. Today, we've got a number of hand baskets to talk about. And what we want to do is very briefly consider some of the ramifications of a number of things. One, the assassination of Shinzo Abe in Japan, to the turmoil in Sri Lanka, and that is really a harbinger of things that may be coming to Zambia and Lebanon, and of course Argentina, which may be defaulting on $45 billion in its external debt, although
they're not the only ones
eating it like heroin. But anyway, so Shinzo Abe and the assassination, Sri Lanka's turmoil, and what else, Arianna?
Boris and his resignation.
The English have really been reduced to second-tier status when the first thing on my mind is Japan, the second thing is Sri Lanka, and then I just the good news with respect to the English. So we can maybe do the English first because I think it's kind of cool. With the resignation of Boris, the news that I saw reported was not so much about the ramifications. It looks like everyone in Britain now wants to be the head of the Conservative Party.
Yes.
At least a dozen, but that wasn't the big news. Besides the son of Prince William being too hot in his suit at Wimbledon, that was a bit of news. The other news is that the English are taking the opportunity, or the Brits are taking the opportunity now to seriously consider, because they've got plenty of time and there's nothing else going on in the world, to seriously consider going back to a measurement in feet and inches, since they were no longer part of the European Union.
Why not?
If there's any statement that best characterizes the ramifications of the effect of the resignation of Boris Johnson from the prime ministership of Britain, it's that the most important thing that people may be fretting about in Britain is whether or not they should be counting.
I had no idea. Actually, that is hilarious.
No, of course, that's not true. And certainly within the glitterati set, the people who are using taxpayer money to go to all kinds of places and hobnob with each other. And of course, for us, among them, of course, Boris is big news, but big news in the way that, Mrs. X's dress is being worn for the second time in the season at Newport might have been important to the industrial set in the 1890s. Beyond that, I suspect
it may have. Come on.
Now, but and the other thing is, of course, everyone loves these resignations because you can practice writing obituaries, and so they were writing obituaries for Mr. Johnson, and he was important. The resignation may or may not be important. His role in the history of the UK has been important, certainly in the sense of him being instrumental in seeing Brexit through. The thing that began at a hot dog shop, I forget what, there's some mythological story that this all began at some kind of sad restaurant.
There will be epics created about this story.
Well, no, this will be a sad epic. This is Brexit, the story of Brexit starting when the then Prime Minister, I think it was Cameron, got stuck at O'Hare, and they were dawdling and worrying about what to do. And they said, oh, I know how we can get reelected. Let's put Brexit on as a
table.
referendum. And right, and then this thing acquired a life of its own. But I think it was Boris who
No,
more
and
than
then Theresa May was like, oh shit.
well, yeah, I think her obituary was written and has yet to be finished. She may be machinating here too, but it's certainly a delightful English version of politics. But it was Brexit. If you will be known for nothing else, it'll be Brexit. With respect to the other stuff, that it's the usual sort of scandals that can either be ignored if you like the prime minister, or can bring a prime minister down if you don't like him, or if he's lost popularity, and blah. What do you think? Are you going to miss Boris?
Well, as he said, them's the breaks.
Are you measuring that in inches or in centimeters?
Well,
Anyway, so the only other thing is, of course, Britain having to carry its load as part of the Western Alliance, and the problems with on the continent. But let's see what happens. Right now, the resignation has turned the UK inward again, as everyone is fighting over the carcass of state to see who gets to reanimate. It's like some kind of zombie demon who gets to reanimate this carcass, this apparatus under their leadership, and we'll see how long they last.
I will be sad to see him go, because it was entertaining seeing him kind of flop around. And
well, I mean, who's to say he's going? He's certainly not going to be prime minister anymore, but you know, it's like leaving the CIA. You're kind of out, but you're never really out.
oh, that's true.
Right. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, Boris, will miss you.
But we won't miss you. We'll see you
No,
around.
I mean,
You're
we
right.
will. And I
We'll see
guess
you
there's
around.
a lot of people hated you. A lot of people liked you. A lot of people were indifferent to you. For those
He
who
reminds
hate
to
Brexit,
me, he was
right?
like Trump's twin. They're like twinsies across the
Right,
sea. Because
right.
they're
What?
both brash. They have this
Yeah,
real
but
tendency to like over exaggerate and be super blustery, and the hair, it's the hair
well,
thing.
you know what it is. You just have adverse reactions to boorish men. Um,
It
a
might
lot
be
of
that.
people have adverse relations to boorish men, but that doesn't make him either good or bad. I mean, and remember, I mean, Trump is being now reconstituted. One would have thought that he would have slinked back to wherever it was he came from and he'd be forgotten, but no, the Democrats have decided that they are going to resurrect him as the demon, scary nightmare figure, the worst possible nightmare image in American history, which of course means
He is still trying to turn
Oh
over
my
the
God.
2020 election results.
oh, it's just, you know, I thought we were done, but it's like we're replaying, what is it? Groundhog Day, we're replaying this over and over and over again. It's like, give us a break. But even here, I mean, we can't talk about Boris without talking about our new mythological 21st century American demon. But, you know, please. All right, so let's move on.
Yes.
Much more, I think, significant. Boris is significant, but from a historical perspective, much more significant and really tragic. And I say that, and I know that that may get me in trouble, is the assassination of Shinzo Abe.
Yeah. I mean, he, of course, was a controversial figure, specifically because he is known to be a Japanese, he's been described as a right-wing Japanese nationalist. He's
By
been
whom? By his
associated.
enemies. Of course,
He's been associated
I'm surprised
with,
his enemies didn't describe him as a combination of Mothra and King Kong or Godzilla.
listen, he's been associated, I'm not saying what is or what isn't, but he's been associated with the Nippon Kaigi, which is Japan's largest far-right, ultra-conservative, ultra-nationalist, and reactionary non-governmental organization and lobby. So in that that could make people think one way or another. And people have certain thoughts about it because of the way he handled the idea of comfort women during World War II. That whole thing is between, South Korea, World War II. It's that people have thoughts, but the whole, we're talking about the assassination here. My thought about this was really, it was fascinating to me the way it happened, and that's what I wanted to focus on, is that it was done with a homemade gun. And that is, because obviously Japan is it's a mostly safe place that is mostly devoid of handguns, and compared to the United States, of course.
Yeah, but
we
the
have
Americans
mass
don't have a
shootings.
very high rate of assassinating
Like-
their highest level political figures either, even though we tend to pop everyone else.
Right.
But yeah, the homemade gun thing was kind of
It's
interesting.
interesting, and it makes you think about the legislation that people push, and well, what can you do to mitigate that kind of action when people are free to do whatever they want in their homes?
All right, so here's a question for you. What if, would we be having, and for me, this is a very American conversation, and we're kind of projecting our own gun issues and gun challenges in the US
Absolutely.
to this thing, which is weird for me, given the Japanese context. But would we be having this conversation if instead, and you saw the pictures, that the guy got within feet of him before he pulled out the gun. He could have as easily, I suppose, pulled out a large butcher knife and stabbed him in the heart. Would we be having this conversation if he'd have stabbed him in the heart with a knife? That now we have, and you see where I'm going. The question,
The whole
is,
conversation was about, was about security and how security was lax around the prime minister, and why
former
was
prime minister,
the former prime minister. So,
right. But the Americans focused on the gun. The Japanese are focusing on security. Or are they focusing on the gun too?
Because I think for Americans, we assume that there's a certain amount of security for an elected official. At least for me, I assume that there is an extreme amount or a certain degree of security
for officials. But
even for former,
okay.
I do expect that. I do expect that.
Okay.
I do expect that.
Yeah, and especially in Abe's case, to some extent, he was formally a former official, but an extraordinarily influential one, and one that was still, at least in terms of influence, critically important, besides those things that are indeed controversial and with respect to which there is a lot of emotion, Korean relations, especially with respect to Japan's wartime activities, and his sympathies for various political movements. The one thing that he played a crucial role in two respects, with respect to which the assassination really was quite important in terms of its potential ramifications. One was, as the architect of the Quad, the effort to develop a kind of united front in the engagement with China.
Yes, I
And,
mean,
and,
I
and, he was
appreciate his
crucial.
strengthening of
And,
the
and
defense. Mhm.
right, and the defense forces, both of which were long overdue and very controversial, especially for people who thought that the post-1945 settlement was set in stone forever.
Which is
But
ridiculous.
right. And that would be the subject of another podcast. But the Quad was clearly important. And most interesting is that here you've got a context in which the Americans are not taking the lead. And all of a sudden you have Abe who's guiding this. And you wonder, but we've had this has been a weird time for American leadership, certainly since the end of the Obama administration.
Mhm.
And Abe stepped in and to some extent
It
was
was perfect.
he was protecting American interests better than the American presidents.
Yes.
And that was his loss there may be important with respect to Japan's defense, with respect to the coordination of this thing. And the other thing, and this is a thing that for me, Mr. Trump's low tide mark, was Abe stepped in when President Obama failed to finish finalizing the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And Mr. Trump then, in a decision that still makes me crazy, decides to pull the plug on TPP. Abe was the critical force that saved it to the extent he could. And that was also critically important. So you've got both economic coordination and now geopolitical and military coordination, all of this coming from Japan in the absence of American leadership.
Yeah, I mean, he also initiated talks between Japan, the US, Australia, and India. He was the one who initiated those quadrilateral.
Right. Exactly. And he was willing to talk much less successfully, of course, with Putin and with the Chinese core leadership, both relatively unsuccessful tensions between China and Japan, and cultural tensions. That is the willingness of governments to allow their people to continue to entertain feelings of unhappiness between the two countries remains a real issue. But it was really sad. And of course, I was waiting for the conspiracy theorists to come in but I didn't see it. I think people have done a good job of suppressing that kind of speculation. Was this a North Korean hit at the behest of the Russians? There'd been a lot of activity in Japanese waters with the Chinese and Russian military. Was this a signal to the Japanese to ramp down what the Russians might call Japanese military adventurism? I mean, but none of that showed up.
No.
So that was really surprising.
The reality is a 41-year-old man was upset that his mother was donating way too much money to a world peace and unification church, and he thought that Shinzo Abe was
unification church. Isn't that a Korean-based church?
I'm not sure, but he thought that Shinzo Abe was
connected.
Yes, connected in some way. So he was following him.
Yeah, and it's always interesting. We have here yet another person who seems to be an instrument in his own mind or whatever. But I'm reminded as you were talking about his controversial legacy, it reminds me of what Deng Xiaoping once said of Mao Zedong, which was, Mao was 70% right and 30% wrong, and maybe that's how one has to judge him.
Yeah.
And in the end, it may be that ultimately opinion will be that Shinzo Abe was X% right and X% wrong. But that makes him neither a god nor a monster, but certainly an incredibly influential man who in his own way sought to protect his country and his country's friends.
I think that one of the ways that you can tell a good leader, and it's going to be upsetting, is that you're not going to make everybody happy. There's no way you can.
Right.
So
right.
Everybody is going to be lukewarm. It's probably pretty much how it's going to end up being.
Right. And of course, all of this is happening simultaneously, and we move from Britain and Japan to Sri Lanka.
Yes. Oh, right. Man. And that was anything but lukewarm.
Right.
There were massive protests.
Right. And it's interesting, in my class in the School of International Affairs, I do a lot of hypothetical scenarios, especially in developing countries, where I talk about the very real risk in countries where their leaders fail to be sensitive to the needs of their people, for political action not to be undertaken as they might in Europe or in the most highly developed East Asian countries, behind closed doors in fancy meeting rooms and hotels and other centers, but on the street, the good old-fashioned way. And I warn my students that this is a very real way in which mass impulses can be felt, especially in developing countries where people have no other means of expressing their views in these countries. Everything else is roadblock. And here we go, Sri Lanka. That is apparently, we don't know the full story yet, but that's apparently what happened. You've got a group of people, family, to some extent family retainers, a closely knit group of people coming out of the Civil War years ago that then lock into power. And they manage over the course of several years to drive the country and its people to a very unhappy state, unhappy enough that I'll use a French analogy from 1789, the sans-culottes will march on Versailles, right? And unlike Versailles, of course, they did not drag the royal family with them back to the Palais Royal.
They wanted to.
Paris. Right. These was the 21st century. You've got better monitoring equipment, and you cut off a couple kings' heads.
But I feel like
their successors
they burned the house down. They burned a house down. I feel
they did some burning, they did some trashing, they did some walking around. We saw variations of this in other developing states. And again, the press likes watching angry people acting out, and that's kind of the story that they present. And no one really bothers. You have to get to like paragraph 5, 6, or 7 to get to what brings this about. Right. It's
an economic crisis.
Well, a number of them. I've seen a number of stories. And ironically enough, the trigger is always the small one. And again, here, this is actually quite ironic. It's gendered. When we look at Sri Lanka, we can't, the people who tend to write this tend to look at it through a gendered lens. And this is a male privileged gendered lens. And so the analysis will focus on the horrible debt crisis of Sri Lanka to the Chinese. That serves the American narrative as well. So you killed 2 birds with 1 stone. And now the Chinese are controlling a key port, although there's a controversy over how key this port is. But anyway, you've got that. You've got an enormous amount of debt and debt load. You've got macroeconomic policy that apparently was being run and implemented by people who who might have made better choices at virtually every turn. But again, this is, if you look at this, we're gendering this male. We get less male when we get to, I saw some reports about a disastrous economic policy where they were trying to make Sri Lanka green, everything organic, no fertilizers and stuff. And of course, the results, if you don't do this right and over time, will be disastrous. But now the gendered story. When does this explode? It's hard to get gas. For men, that means gas for their cars, male. But what sets this off? For women, and we're living in a gendered society, for women, it's the failure of access to propane and heating oil for cooking, no food, households. And if you think about it, right, the crisis, in a sense, was the straw that may, and we don't know this yet, and I'm speculating, the straw, if you look at this without a gendered lens or through a more feminist gendered lens, it's the threat not to the outward male part, but to the tradition. Again, we're using traditional gender terms, and for people who feel that this is horrible, you know, work hard to overturn this and et cetera, but in a traditional gendered way, you mess with the home and the kitchen, and things can, it looks like things can explode.
Yeah, nobody's gonna get fed. Nobody's gonna eat.
No one's going to get eaten, and you're dealing with, and of course, I forget, there's an American academic who talks about this. In traditional societies, when you talk about females, you aren't talking just about females, you're talking about women and children.
Mhm.
Right? So it's that dyad. And once, it's one thing if who's ever working, and there are a lot of women in traditional society who are also working, and that becomes an issue as well. But it's one thing to have to walk to work. It's another thing when you come home and there's nothing, you can't feed your babies.
Yeah. Citizens, you know, queuing up for essential supplies like milk and you know, other things that aren't available to
Right,
buy anymore.
right. And back the classic 18th century mistake, while, and this is where those pictures of that palace comes in, while that small group of people who are leading
Are dining on grapes,
oh my
cake.
God. Right. The only thing that's missing is the 200-foot mega yacht
Yeah.
from the lifestyles of the rich and famous. And so you get this. The question then, of course, with these explosions is what happens next. Because an explosion is a momentary reset, but what are you resetting to?
Right. They want a completely new government. They want to restructure the government along with the debt restructuring program that they are in current talks with the IMF with.
Yeah.
But
so they're going to call you up for the new government,
right? Who's going to do that?
And who's gonna do that?
They want the prime minister and the president to be out of office while that's happening.
Oh, sure. You mean the current ones?
Yes.
Yeah, right. So there's been kind of a coup. You worry about the democratic process, but you don't worry about it all that much, I think, in this case. But think about who gets to replace the current lifestyles of the rich and famous leadership.
I'm worried about who does that.
It would be
Another
drawn
rich
from
person?
the same. It would be drawn from the same social and economic
Right.
class. So, are you replacing the Duke of Earl with the Earl of Duke?
Yes.
So the only thing that's different is their last name.
Yeah.
And that becomes a problem as well. And so we get, and that's a nice way of saying these periodic explosions don't do very much to unravel systemic issues. And here the problem with the systemic issues that is heavily built into the social structure of the country and its and the depth of its capacity for ruling. So effectively, what you may be doing is replacing one member of the class, all of whom are heavily involved in the fruits of this system, with another member.
For the exact same thing.
Right, and that's a pity, but another explosion. So you've got assassination, we've got scandal, and probably a person who just ran out of steam in the UK. We've got mass explosions, given the traditional failures in a developing state that tends to be exploited, and now by larger states. And now, as you mentioned, the IMF is coming in trying to throw them a little bit of a lifeline so that they can remain productively exploited
Exactly.
and calm. So and there are others on the horizon, right? So I mentioned the possibility of Argentina's defaulting on something like $45 billion in loans. We've been down this road how many times? This is another structural issue. We've got all this money, it's got nowhere to go. Argentina has a history, very much like I tend to be in bed by 11. Argentina tends to default on their loans every X number of years. It doesn't really matter what government they have, bad things happen, and yet they keep getting it. I guess that's the nature of sovereigns. They never disappear. And so you're playing musical chairs with money, but it's highly disruptive. And of course, Sri Lanka may be followed by the reports I've seen is Lebanon and Zambia. Zambia would be a big China connection. Lebanon is it's a very different problem.
And we should actually, I would be interested to talk about what it looks like when debt-ridden countries default.
For whom?
For those countries.
Yeah, we can.
And the countries they are beholden to.
Yeah, no, we can pod that. We can, that would be fun. And so what do you make of all of this? I mean, the interesting thing is all happening within a fairly condensed period of time.
It made me think of the first thing I thought of, and this is terrible, is made me think of just falling dominoes.
Oh my God, we had this domino theory once. When if you let one country fall to the European communists, then all the other countries would fall. Of course, it didn't speak very highly of the liberal democratic system, since it didn't seem to take much for a country to fall.
But it's not like, Fumio Kishida is still running. He's doing his campaigning.
Right, and they just had their election, didn't they?
He's campaigning.
Okay, when's the election?
Relatively soon. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe in the fall or in a couple months.
Oh, okay.
Soon. But business as usual.
Right. So is this going to scar Japan?
No. But no, it won't. It, of course, there's resilience. It's just technology is always going to be there. Progress is, we're just going to have to think about things differently now.
There, but Japan will remain engaged in the world then.
Yes, I mean that's become clear, specifically, if not because of just what's been going on around Japan.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I can imagine in the short term, nothing much is going to change in Britain or Sri Lanka or Japan.
No.
But of course, everyone worries that in the longer term, right, things will get a little different.
Yes.
But we will find out. And of course, the elephant in this room is all of this is being undertaken in the shadow of the Russo-Ukrainian war. You can't really escape it. It's in everyone's calculus, even if you're, 5 or 6 degrees of separation away. You're not disconnected from this thing. And given the choices that the Chinese have made with respect to their friendship with Russia, given the choices that India is making in terms of hedging. Not that they had much choice, but it makes sense for them that every one of these outbursts or these moments of instability are likely placed in someone's calculus somewhere for some kind of advantage.
Yeah.
So last words.
Them's the breaks.
Oh God, that's so cynical. Well,
Taking it from Boris.
all right, I guess. Well, my sympathies to and my best wishes to the people of Britain, my sympathies to the people of Sri Lanka, with hopes that at some point they will be able to overcome in a nationally contextual way the systemic challenges that bring about these periodic explosions. And my deepest sympathies and condolences to the Japanese people. Assassinations are a horrible thing. And I think with that, until next time.
Until next time, bark, bark.
Woof, woof.